The gunshot cracked through the Montana morning like lightning splitting oak. Thomas Stone, 87 years old, with a spine still straight as a surveyor's rod, burst from his ranch house door. The smell of cordite hung in the cold November air. His grandson Michael stood in the barn doorway, 16 years of accumulated rage compressed into white knuckles wrapped around a Colt single-action Army revolver. 6 tin cans lay scattered across the hard-packed dirt of the yard. Only one had fallen. Tom's boots hit the ground in measured steps, each one calculated like a chess move. He'd learned long ago that sudden movements around armed boys led to tragedy, the kind of tragedy that followed a man through decades that woke him sweating in the dark hours before dawn. "Boy," he said, voice carrying the gravel of too many years and too many words left unspoken. "Put that down, now." Michael turned. His eyes held that peculiar brightness of youth convinced it had discovered truths the old had forgotten. "You don't understand, Grandpa. Nobody respects weakness anymore. Not at school, not anywhere. You have to show them you're not afraid." Tom kept walking, closing the distance. 20 feet. 15. 10. When he reached striking range, his hand moved with a speed that belied his age. The Colt vanished from Michael's grip and materialized in Tom's weathered palm like a magic trick performed by time itself. He held the weapon with the careful disgust of a man holding a rattlesnake by the tail. "This thing," Tom said, turning the revolver over in his hands, examining it like evidence at a trial, "doesn't make you strong. It makes you responsible. Responsible for every bullet that leaves the barrel. Responsible for every piece of lead that finds flesh. This is a Colt single-action Army, manufactured 1873, chambered in .45 long Colt, 6 rounds in the cylinder. No safety mechanism, no second chances. You pull this trigger, something dies. Maybe the thing you're aiming at. Maybe something you love. Maybe a piece of your own soul." Michael's jaw set in that stubborn way teenagers have when they're convinced the world has conspired to misunderstand them. "That's old-timer talk. You don't know what it's like now." Tom studied his grandson's face and saw himself reflected there across the canyon of years, saw the same hollow hunger for meaning, the same desperate search for identity in a world that seemed designed to grind young men into dust. He saw the boy he'd been at 16, fatherless and furious, convinced that strength came from the barrel of a gun. "You're right," Tom said quietly. "I don't know your world, but I know this weapon, know what it does to a man's heart when he uses it, know what it costs." He handed the Colt back handle first, an offering and a challenge. "Come inside. I'll tell you a story about what this thing really does, about what it cost me, about what it gave me, and then you can decide if you still want to carry it." Inside the ranch house, warmth from the wood stove pushed back against the Montana cold. Tom led Michael through the living room, past photographs, spanning generations, into a small room he kept locked except for moments of absolute necessity. The air here smelled different. Old wood and gun oil and something else, something like memory, made tangible. A trunk sat beneath the window, its wood scarred and darkened by time, reinforced with iron bands that had oxidized to the color of dried blood. Tom knelt his knees, protesting with audible pops. He lifted the lid with both hands, revealing contents wrapped in oilcloth and faded cotton. The Winchester Model 1873 lay in the center, its lever-action mechanism still gleaming despite rust spots that marked the barrel like age spots on skin. Beside it, a photograph browned to the color of weak tea showed a man standing rigid next to an Apache woman. Her hand rested on a young boy's shoulder. All three looked at the camera with expressions that dared it to look away. "That's you." Michael picked up the photograph with the careful reverence usually reserved for religious relics. 40 years old when that was taken? Summer of 1880. Same age your father is now, if you can believe it. Tom settled into the room's only chair, a ladder back that had traveled with him from Arizona Territory all those decades ago. "The woman is your great-grandmother Iceland, Apache, Chiricahua band originally. The boy is your grandfather Kai, though he died in the Great War before you were born." This photograph was taken 2 years after the story I'm about to tell you. 2 years after the summer that changed everything I thought I knew about being a man. Michael studied the faces captured in silver nitrate and time. You look different. Harder. I was harder. Had to be to survive what came before. Tom reached into the trunk and pulled out a turquoise stone the size of a silver dollar wrapped in ribbon so faded its original color had become a matter of speculation. This belonged to her. She wore it the night she came to my door in Arizona territory and made me an offer that seemed impossible. An offer that forced me to choose between the man I'd been and the man I might become. He closed his eyes. Outside, the Montana wind picked up rattling window panes that had witnessed this ritual before. Tom let himself fall backward through the years, through the accumulated weight of decades, until he landed in the summer of 1878, when the world was younger and considerably less forgiving. Arizona Territory, June 1878. The cabin crouched against red cliffs like a man trying to disappear into stone. Thomas Stone had selected this location with the methodical precision he'd once applied to tracking outlaws across 3 territories. 3 days' hard ride from Tucson. 2 weeks from anywhere that could properly call itself a town. The land cost him nothing because nobody else wanted it. Hardscrabble desert, where water came grudgingly, and crops grew only through sheer force of human stubbornness. Every morning Tom woke with the sun and worked until his muscles screamed for mercy. He'd built the cabin himself, cutting ponderosa pine from the high country and dragging it down piece by piece. Raised the walls square and true. Fitted the roof with tin sheets he'd bought with the last of his bounty money. Dug a well 40 feet deep before hitting water that tasted of minerals and ancient stone. Built corrals and fences and a small barn that leaned slightly to the east but kept the weather out. The work was brutal and endless and exactly what he needed. Physical exhaustion was the only thing that let him sleep without dreaming of the 37 men whose lives he'd ended. 37. He'd counted them all, kept a list in a leather journal he never opened anymore, but couldn't bring himself to burn. Each name written in careful script, each entry dated and annotated with location and circumstances. A ledger of death maintained with the precision of an accountant tallying debts. Most of them had been clean kills. Professional work. Men who'd earned their bounties through robbery and murder and worse. Tom had tracked them, confronted them, given them chances to surrender that most hadn't taken. The law had wanted them dead or alive. Tom had been efficient about providing one or the other. For 12 years he'd been the best bounty hunter working the territories. Fast, accurate, ruthless in the way young men are when they haven't yet learned that every death diminishes the killer as much as the killed. The Winchester Model 1873 had been his tool. Lever-action repeating rifle, 15 rounds of .44-40 ammunition, effective range of 200 yards in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. Tom had known, could put a round through a playing card at 100 paces, could fire lever fire again in under 2 seconds. The rifle had made him efficient, had made him wealthy by frontier standards, had made him something less than human in ways he hadn't understood until Tombstone. 5 years ago, October 1872. A saloon shootout that started over cards and ended with bodies in the street. Tom had been tracking Jesse Crane, wanted for bank robbery and murder in 3 states. $2,000 bounty, dead or alive. When Crane and his gang shot their way out of the saloon, Tom had been waiting in the darkness across the street. Winchester loaded and ready. He'd dropped Crane with a single shot. Professional work, clean through the heart. The outlaw was dead before he hit the ground, but in the chaos and gun smoke and darkness, a shadow had moved wrong. Too small, too quick. Running toward the dying man instead of away from the gunfire. Tom's finger had pulled the trigger before his brain could countermand the order his body had learned through 12 years of survival instinct. Billy Crane was 12 years old. He'd run from the saloon to save his father's arms outstretched like love could stop bullets. The 44-40 round took him in the chest, high and center, precisely where Tom had aimed at the shadow he'd perceived as threat. The boy had gone down hard. Tom remembered the sound, remembered how it differed from the sound of grown men falling. Something lighter, more fragile, more wrong. Jesse Crane had crawled to his son, neither man speaking. The outlaw holding his dying boy in the dusty street, while Tom stood frozen 15 yards away, rifle still smoking. Billy's last words hadn't been about pain, hadn't been prayers or pleas. He'd looked at his father with eyes already glazing and whispered, "Pa, I tried to save you." Then he'd died, just stopped breathing, stopped being. Became a thing instead of a person in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Tom had walked away from bounty hunting that night, hadn't even collected the $2,000 on Jesse Crane's head, sold his horse and gear, bought this worthless piece of desert, built this cabin, locked the Winchester in an iron-banded trunk he'd buried in the corner of his single room like a coffin for the man he'd been. For 5 years he'd lived alone with Billy Crane's ghost, worked the land until exhaustion granted him dreamless sleep, spoke to no one, wanted nothing, told himself this was enough, told himself this was what he deserved, a life measured in sunrises and sunsets and the slow accumulation of calluses on hands that had once been steady enough to kill from 200 yards. The knock came at sunset on a June evening when the sky burned orange and purple over the cliffs. Tom almost ignored it. Nobody knew he lived here. Nobody had reason to seek him out. But the sound came again, weaker, followed by a thud that meant weight hitting wood, the sound of a body falling. He opened the door to find an Apache woman collapsed across his threshold. Her buckskin dress hung in tatters dark with sweat and dust, and something that might have been blood. Both feet were wrapped in makeshift bandages that had once been parts of her dress, now soaked through with seepage that looked infected. Her long black hair had come loose from its bindings and spread across his doorstep like spilled ink. She looked up at him with eyes that held no plea for mercy, no appeal to charity. Only the hard calculation of someone who'd already lost everything worth losing and was now making a final wager with the only currency she had left. Tom's first instinct was to close the door. He'd spent 5 years building walls between himself and the world, 5 years avoiding complications and connections and anything that might pull him back into the orbit of violence and consequence. But something in her eyes stopped him. Not weakness, not desperation. Something harder and more honest than either of those things. Something that looked like decision made and accepted. He carried her inside. She weighed almost nothing, all sinew and determination, compressed into a frame that felt like it might shatter if handled roughly. He laid her on his cot and brought water from the well, cold and mineral tasting. While she drank, he examined her feet by lamplight. Cactus spines had driven deep into the soles, dozens of them, some already festering with the kind of infection that led to fever and delirium and death if left untreated. Tom heated his knife blade in the fire until it glowed red, then let it cool to black. He'd need to cut deep to get the spines out. "This will hurt," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. She nodded once, didn't speak, didn't flinch when he began cutting. Tom worked with the careful precision he'd learned from army surgeons during the war, made small incisions, extracted each spine with tweezers he sterilized in flame between removals, washed each wound with whiskey that had to burn like liquid fire. She made no sound beyond controlled breathing. When he finished wrapping her feet in clean cotton torn from his only spare shirt, she finally spoke. "Comancheros took my son." Her English carried the precise diction of missionary schools, each word carefully shaped, but beneath it ran something older and harder, something that spoke of languages that predated English by thousands of years. 7 riders, heading toward Skull Mesa. They have been gone 3 days now. Tom sat back on his heels, studied her face in the lamplight. She was perhaps 30, perhaps 40. Hard to tell with Apache women who aged differently than white women, their skin toughened by sun and wind, and lives lived mostly outdoors. A turquoise stone hung from a leather cord around her neck, the only ornament she wore. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it, "but I can't help you." "I have nothing to pay you." She said it like a statement of fact rather than an apology. No shame in her voice, no begging. "No gold, no horses, no land. The white man's law does not recognize Apache as citizens. We cannot own property, cannot testify in courts, cannot seek justice through your systems. But I can offer you myself." The words hit Tom like a fist to the solar plexus. He stood abruptly turned away, anger rising hot in his throat. "I don't buy and sell people." Not buy, not sell. She pushed herself upright despite what it must have cost her feet freshly cut and bandaged. "In my people's tradition, a widow may choose a warrior to stand beside her, to protect what remains of her family. If you save my son, I will stand beside you as wife for 1 year. After that year, I am free to leave if I choose. You are free to send me away if you choose. But for 1 year, we make this bargain, equal to equal. Not master and slave, not buyer and bought, partnership." Tom turned back to face her. "I'm not a warrior. I'm a killer who retired because his hands shake too badly to aim straight anymore. Find someone else." "There is no one else." She met his eyes without wavering. "The cavalry does not protect Apache. They hunt us, round us up like animals for the reservations. The law does not recognize us as human beings with rights. We cannot seek help from sheriffs or marshals, cannot hire lawyers, cannot expect justice. I come to you because I see what you are. A man carrying guilt like stones in a sack, a man who understands debt and payment and the weight of unpaid accounts." Tom wanted to argue, wanted to explain that understanding debt and being capable of repaying it were vastly different things. But the words stuck in his throat because she was absolutely correct. He did understand, carried Billy Crane's death like a stone he could never put down, never throw away, never escape. And looking at this woman, at the fierce dignity in her bearing, despite exhaustion and injury and desperation, he saw something that terrified him more than any gunfight ever had. He saw a chance at redemption, maybe the only one he'd ever get. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Islin." The name sounded like wind through canyon stones, like water over rocks, like something that belonged to the land itself. "My son is Kai. He is 7 years old. He believes his father will return from the dead to save him because I told him stories to give him hope through the nights. But his father is 2 years in the ground, taken by the white man's sickness, the consumption. There is only me, and now perhaps there is you." Tom walked to the window and looked out at the desert darkening toward the night. The sky had gone from purple to indigo to the deep blue-black that preceded true darkness. Stars were beginning to emerge hard and bright and indifferent. Somewhere out there, perhaps 30 or 40 miles distant, a 7-year-old boy sat, terrified, in a Comanchero camp, waiting for rescue that wouldn't come unless Tom picked up the Winchester he'd sworn never to touch again. The thought of it made his hands shake worse, made his chest tight, with the kind of fear that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of, exactly what the rifle could do in his hands, exactly what it would cost him to become that man again, even temporarily. But beneath the fear ran something else, something that felt almost like purpose, the first real purpose he'd felt in 5 years of voluntary exile. He turned back to Islin. "I can't promise success. Can't promise I won't get us both killed. My aim isn't what it was 5 years ago. My nerves are shot. I wake up shaking most mornings. And if we find your son, there's no guarantee we'll get him out alive. Comancheros don't give up their prizes easily. They'll fight. People will die. Maybe me, maybe you, maybe the boy we're trying to save." "I know all of this." She said it with the calm of someone who'd already performed every calculation, weighed every risk, accepted every terrible possibility. "But you are here. You answered the door when I knocked. You cut the poison from my feet instead of turning me away to die in the desert. That is more than anyone else has done, more than I had any right to expect. If you ride with me and we fail, at least I will have tried. At least I will die trying. That is enough." Tom nodded slowly, made his decision, felt it settle into his bones like weight he'd been avoiding for 5 years, finally accepted. "Get some rest. Drink more water. At first light, we ride." That night sleep refused to come. Tom lay on the floor wrapped in a single blanket while Iselin took his cot and stared at the ceiling beams he'd cut and raised himself. The Winchester called to him from its trunk like a voice from a grave he'd tried to seal shut. He resisted until midnight, then gave up and retrieved it. The trunk's lock had rusted slightly. Took him 3 tries to get the key to turn. When he lifted the lid, the smell of gun oil hit him like memory made tangible. The Winchester lay wrapped in oilcloth treated with preservatives. Tom unwrapped it slowly, hands trembling worse than usual. The rifle felt foreign now. Heavier than he remembered, though it weighed the same 15 pounds it always had. He worked the lever action. The mechanism moved smoothly, well-oiled despite 5 years of storage. The weapon hadn't forgotten its purpose, even if the man holding it had tried to. Tom carried it to the porch and sat in darkness. The desert stretched silent under stars, so thick they looked like salt spilled across black cloth. Somewhere out there 7 Comancheros rode with their stolen cargo. Somewhere out there a boy named Kai waited in darkness, believing in rescue that might never come. And somewhere in the deepest part of Tom's memory, Billy Crane still fell, still bled, still whispered those final words to his father. "I can't save you, Billy," Tom said to the empty desert, to the indifferent stars, to the ghost that had haunted him for 5 years. "Can't undo what I did, can't bring you back, but maybe I can save someone else. Maybe I can stop one child from dying afraid and alone. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all redemption ever is, not erasing the past, just doing better with whatever future you have left." The desert offered no answer, just wind and silence and the weight of a Winchester Model 1873 across his knees. Tom sat there until dawn touched the eastern sky with fingers of gold and red, then stood and went inside to wake Iselin. The hunt was about to begin. Dawn came to the Arizona desert like a slow burn heat, building before the sun cleared the horizon. Tom Stone moved through his cabin with the methodical efficiency of a man preparing for war. He'd done this before, dozens of times, but never after 5 years of rust. Never with hands that shook like leaves in wind. Never with this much doubt eating at his certainty. The Winchester came first. He cleaned it thoroughly despite the preservation, running an oiled cloth through the barrel, checking the action, testing the trigger pull. 15 rounds of .44-40 ammunition went into the tubular magazine beneath the barrel. He loaded slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of each brass cartridge. Each one a potential death. Each one a choice he might have to make. His Colt single-action Army revolver came next. 6 rounds in the cylinder hammer, resting on an empty chamber for safety. The gun belt felt strange around his waist after 5 years, like putting on someone else's clothes. He'd lost weight, had to punch a new hole in the leather to make it fit. Iselin watched from the cot feet, still bandaged but her eyes sharp and calculating. She studied his preparations with the attention of someone evaluating a tool for a specific job. Tom felt her assessment like pressure against his skin. "You move like a man who expects to die," she said finally. Tom paused in the act of filling his canteen. "I move like a man who's died before and came back. You learn to prepare thoroughly when you've seen how quickly things can go wrong. Tell me about your weapon." It wasn't a request. "If we ride together, I need to know what you can do with it." Tom lifted the Winchester, held it across both palms like an offering. Model 1873, lever action, repeating rifle. Holds 15 rounds of .44-40 ammunition, same caliber as the Colt, which makes logistics simpler. Effective range about 200 yards in skilled hands. in my hands used to be accurate to within 2 inches at 100 paces. Now, he shrugged, we'll find out. The shaking, Iceland said. When did it start? 5 years ago, after Tombstone, after I killed a boy. Tom set the rifle down. No point in hiding it. His name was Billy Crane, 12 years old, ran out to save his outlaw father. I shot him before my brain recognized what I was seeing. Been shaking ever since, some days worse than others. And today, Tom held out his right hand. The tremor was visible, a fine quiver that made his fingers dance slightly. Bad day. But I've learned to work through it. Breathing helps, slow trigger pull. Accepting that the first shot might miss. Iceland nodded as if he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. In my people's tradition, a warrior who cannot be perfect must be adaptable. You will miss, so you must shoot more. Carry more ammunition than you think you need. Already planning on it, Tom gestured to the supplies accumulating on his table. 120 rounds for the Winchester, 60 for the Colt, probably too much, probably not enough. He continued preparations while she watched. Jerky made from deer he'd shot last autumn, hardtack biscuits that would survive anything short of flood, coffee beans in a leather pouch, 2 gallons of water in canteens knowing they'd need to find more along the way, matches wrapped in oilcloth, a compass he'd carried since the war, maps he'd drawn himself of the territory between here and Skull Mesa. Medical supplies came last. Laudanum for pain, though he had maybe 2 doses left. Bandages torn from old shirts. A surgical knife he'd sterilized in fire more times than he could count. Needles and thread for stitching wounds. Whiskey for sterilization, and if necessary, courage. You prepare like you expect the worst, Iceland observed. I've learned that the worst usually happens. Better to be ready for it. Tom packed everything into saddlebags with careful attention to weight distribution. We'll be moving fast. Can't afford to have gear shifting around. I will not slow you down. She said it with absolute certainty. Tom looked at her feet still wrapped in bandages seeping slightly through the cotton. Those need another day to heal. We do not have another day. Every hour that passes, they take my son farther away. We leave now, or we lose him forever. She was right. Tom knew it even as he wanted to argue for caution. Comancheros moved quickly, always ahead of pursuit. 3 days' head start was already nearly insurmountable. Another day might make it impossible. Can you ride? He asked. I walked 30 miles on those feet to reach you. I can ride. Tom saddled his horse, a rangy bay gelding named Soldier, who'd carried him through the last years of his bounty hunting career. The horse was 12 years old now, past his prime, but still solid, still reliable. Tom checked every strap twice, settled the saddle blanket carefully, made sure the girth was snug, but not tight enough to chafe. Details mattered. Small oversights became fatal mistakes when you were 3 days into desert with no help coming. Iceland emerged from the cabin wearing Tom's spare clothes modified hastily to fit her smaller frame. Canvas pants rolled and belted, a cotton shirt that hung loose, his old hat to keep the sun off. She moved carefully, favoring her injured feet, but she moved. Tom helped her mount Soldier, then swung up behind her. The horse shifted under the double weight but settled quickly. Tom had ridden double before, though not in many years. He'd need to rest the horse more frequently, find water more often, push less hard than he wanted to. Which direction? He asked. Iceland pointed southeast toward where the desert opened into badlands and then mountains. They follow the old Apache trails toward Skull Mesa. 3 days ahead, but they have captives. Children slow them down. We might close the distance. Tom touched heels to Soldier's flanks. The horse moved out at a walk that would eat miles without burning energy they'd need later. The sun cleared the horizon and heat began building like pressure in a boiler. They rode in silence for the first hour, Tom focusing on the terrain while Iceland watched the ground. He'd forgotten how much desert looked the same, endless variations of sand and rock and scrub. Navigation required constant attention to landmarks. That distinctive rock formation. This particular wash cutting through caliche hardpan, the angle of morning shadows that would reverse come afternoon. There, Iselin pointed to disturbed ground barely visible in the hardpan. Unshod hooves, multiple horses. 2 days old, perhaps 3. Tom dismounted to examine the tracks. He'd been good at this, once reading sign, but Iselin was better. She knelt beside the tracks, fingers tracing patterns in the dust he could barely see. 7 horses, she said, moving at a walk, not hurried. Heavy loads, but not heavy enough to be adult riders. Children weigh less. And here. She indicated a scuff mark. Someone fell. Was dragged back up. Fear makes children clumsy. The detail cut through Tom like a knife. A child falling, being dragged back onto a horse by rough hands, terrified and alone and believing no rescue was coming. He thought of Billy Crane and pushed the thought away. That was the past. This was now. This he might be able to fix. They remounted and followed the trail. Iselin read the ground like some people read books, finding meaning in disturbances Tom could barely perceive. A broken mesquite branch here, disturbed stones there, horse droppings that she examined closely, then pronounced less than 48 hours old based on moisture content and fly activity. By noon the heat had become oppressive. 110 degrees, maybe more. The kind of heat that killed incautious travelers and left their bones to bleach white under the merciless sun. Tom called a halt in the shade of an overhanging rock, unsaddled soldier, to let the horses' back breathe rationed water carefully between all 3 of them. "Tell me about Comancheros," he said while they rested. "I've heard stories, but I need facts." Iselin sat with her back against stone, feet elevated slightly. "They are traders, slavers, not Comanche themselves despite the name. Mostly Mexican, some Anglo, some Apache outcasts. They trade in whatever brings profit: horses, guns, whiskey, and children." "What do they do with the children?" "Sell them." Her voice remained level, factual, though Tom saw her hands clench. "To mine owners who need small bodies to fit into narrow shafts. To ranchers who want unpaid labor. To men who want things I will not speak of. The law does not protect Apache children. We are not citizens. We have no rights the white man is bound to respect." The quote came from the Dred Scott decision, Tom realized. She'd learned her law from the same cruel teacher that had learned millions of black Americans their status before the war. His war. The one he'd fought believing he was ending slavery. Turned out he'd only ended one kind. "How much do they sell for?" he asked. $20 for a boy who can work. 50 for a girl old enough to be useful in other ways. More if they are healthy and strong and young enough to be trained into obedience. She said it without emotion, like reading figures from a ledger. "My son is worth perhaps $25 to them. That is what I am asking you to risk your life for. $25 worth of human child." Tom looked at her directly. "Your son is worth whatever it costs to get him back. The money is irrelevant." "Is it?" She met his eyes. "You are risking your life for a woman you met yesterday and a child you have never seen. For what? To pay a debt to a ghost. To ease guilt that will never ease. I offer you partnership, but you offer me charity. I am not certain which of us makes the worse bargain." The observation cut because it was partially true. Tom was doing this at least partly for Billy Crane's ghost, for the chance to save a child and maybe somehow balance accounts that could never be balanced, but not entirely, not anymore. "I'm doing this," he said slowly, "because you knocked on my door, because you asked for help when you had every reason to expect rejection, because seeing you fight just to stand up reminded me that some things are worth fighting for. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I've been a killer. I've been a coward hiding in the desert. Being a fool seems like an improvement." Iselin studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then we are both fools together. This is perhaps a good foundation for partnership." They rode on through the afternoon. The landscape changed gradually. Desert, giving way to badlands, eroded arroyos, cutting through layered stone like wounds in the earth. The trail became easier to follow here, horses leaving clear tracks in sandy washes. But it also became more dangerous. Narrow passages between rock walls, places where ambush would be easy. Tom's hand never strayed far from the Winchester. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the rocks in shades of red and gold, Iceland stiffened behind him. "Stop," she said quietly. Tom reined in immediately. "What is it?" "Smell." He lifted his nose to the wind and caught it, faint but unmistakable. Death, the sweet rot smell of flesh decaying under the desert sun. They found the body 200 yards ahead in a wash sheltered by overhanging stone. Apache male, perhaps 25 years old, shot multiple times in the chest and back. He'd been dead for 2 days, maybe 3. Scavengers had begun their work, but enough remained to see the violence of his end. Iceland dismounted, ignoring the pain in her feet, and knelt beside the body. She touched the man's face with surprising tenderness, then began singing softly in Apache. The words meant nothing to Tom, but the tone carried grief and respect and farewell. When she finished, she looked up. "This is Nantan, my husband's cousin. He must have tracked the Comancheros after they took the children, tried to rescue them alone." "I'm sorry." Tom dismounted and began gathering stones for a cairn. The ground was too hard for proper burial, but they could at least cover him, keep the scavengers off. "He was brave," Iceland said, helping gather stones despite her injuries. "Also foolish." 7 armed men against 1 warrior with only a rifle and courage. The mathematics were not in his favor. They built the cairn in silence, stacking stones carefully, making it high enough that the coyotes couldn't easily scatter it. When they finished, Iceland placed a small turquoise stone on top, then sang another brief song. "What are the words?" Tom asked. "A prayer for the journey, asking the mountain spirits to guide him, asking that his death have meaning." She looked at the cairn expression, unreadable. "He died trying to save my son. That is meaning enough, I think." They made camp as darkness fell, choosing a defensible position in a box canyon with only 1 entrance. No fire. Too risky with Comancheros potentially nearby. They ate jerky and hardtack and drank water that tasted of metal and minerals. Tom took first watch while Iceland slept Winchester across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness for movement that never came. At midnight, they switched. Tom lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind churned through scenarios, calculating odds, planning tactics. 7 armed men, probably experienced fighters, certainly ruthless. Against himself, rusty and shaking, and a wounded Apache woman. The mathematics, as Iceland had said, were not favorable, but he'd faced worse odds before, had won when he shouldn't have, had survived when survival seemed impossible. Maybe he'd get lucky again. Maybe skill and determination could overcome superior numbers. Maybe. "You are thinking too much." Iceland's voice came from the darkness. "I can hear your thoughts from here. Trying to figure out how to do this without getting us killed. There is no way to do this without risk. We accept the risk or we abandon the attempt. You have already chosen. Now you must stop questioning and simply act when the moment comes." Is that Apache wisdom? That is the wisdom of a woman who has buried a husband, a father, 2 brothers, and a sister. Who has learned that thinking about death does not prevent it, only action prevents it, and even then, not always. Tom sat up, abandoning the pretense of sleep. "Tell me about your husband." "Why, because I'm about to risk my life for his son. Seems like I should know something about the man who came before me." Silence stretched long enough that Tom thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "His name was Dakota. It means friend to everyone in our language. He was. Too friendly, perhaps. Too trusting. He believed the white man's promises about reservations and peace and rations. Believed that cooperation would save our people." Her voice carried no bitterness, only weariness. "He died of consumption 2 winters ago, the white man's disease. It killed him slowly, taking his breath piece by piece until there was nothing left. I watched him suffocate over 3 months, could do nothing. Our medicine could not touch it." I'm sorry. Everyone is sorry. Sorry is a word white men use when they take things. Sorry for the land we must take. Sorry for the buffalo we must kill. Sorry for the people we must move. Sorry for the children we must civilize. Sorry, sorry, sorry. But still, they take. Tom had no answer to that. She was right. He'd been part of it himself, hunting Apache for the Army before turning to bounty work. Had helped move them onto reservations, had called it civilization and progress and the inevitable march of destiny. Had never questioned whether destiny gave anyone the right to destroy other people's ways of life. Kai looks like his father, Iceland continued. Same eyes, same smile, same way of trusting people he should not trust. It will get him killed if I do not teach him to be harder. But I do not want him to be hard. I want him to keep his father's kindness. This is the impossible thing I want, to keep him safe while also keeping him good. Perhaps you understand this. Perhaps this is why you hide in the desert, to keep yourself safe from becoming worse. Maybe, Tom admitted. Or maybe I'm just a coward. Cowards do not ride into danger for strangers. You are many things, Thomas Stone, but coward is not one of them. The use of his full name, the gentleness in her voice, struck something in Tom's chest. He looked at her across the darkness, seeing only a silhouette against starlight, and felt the first stirrings of something he'd thought long dead. Not love, too soon for that, but connection, recognition, the sense that here was someone who understood the weight he carried because she carried equal weight herself. We should sleep, he said, voice rougher than intended. Long day tomorrow. Yes, long day. Perhaps our last day. I wanted you to know about Dakota. Wanted you to know the man whose place you might take, even if only temporarily. Tom lay back down Winchester close at hand and stared at stars that had witnessed 10,000 years of human struggle and remained magnificently indifferent. Somewhere under those same stars, a 7-year-old boy named Kai waited in darkness. Somewhere out there, 7 Comancheros rode with their stolen cargo, confident that no pursuit would come. They were wrong. Pursuit had come, and it carried a Winchester Model 1873 in shaking hands that had killed 37 men and 1 boy. Hands that might kill again before this was finished. Hands that might finally find redemption or might simply add more ghosts to the collection. Tom closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him down into darkness. When he woke, dawn was breaking, and Iceland was already up studying the eastern horizon with the intensity of someone reading prophecy in the morning light. They are close, she said without looking at him. I can feel it. Today or tomorrow we catch them. Tom stood, worked the stiffness from his back, checked the Winchester's action. Then we'd better be ready. They mounted and rode toward whatever waited in the desert ahead. Behind them, Nanton's cairn stood silent witness. Ahead, the unknown waited with patient malice. And between the two, a broken gunfighter and a desperate mother rode toward the kind of reckoning that would change everything or end everything. There was no third option. The desert didn't believe in mercy. The ambush came without warning, as all good ambushes do. One moment Tom and Iceland were following tracks through Rattlesnake Canyon. The next moment the world exploded into gunfire and chaos. 3 men materialized on the canyon rim like conjured demons. Muzzle flashes sparked against red rock. Bullets whined off stone and thudded into earth with sounds like fists hitting flesh. Tom threw himself sideways off Soldier, dragging Iceland with him, hitting the ground hard enough to drive air from his lungs. The Winchester flew from his grip, clattering against rocks 3 feet away. Soldier bolted reins, trailing, disappearing around a bend in panicked flight. Their water, their supplies, gone in the space of 3 heartbeats. Tom scrambled for the Winchester while bullets kicked up dust around him. His hands shook worse than ever, adrenaline amplifying the tremor into something almost violent. He got fingers around the stock, pulled the rifle to him, rolled behind a boulder barely large enough to cover his torso. Return fire. Had to return fire or they'd rush the position. Tom levered around into the chamber, popped up from behind cover, acquired a target. one of the shooters, Mexican young, wearing a bandolier across his chest. Tom aimed for center mass, pulled the trigger. The round went wide by a foot. His shaking hand had pulled the barrel off target even as the trigger broke. The Mexican ducked anyway, spooked by the near miss. "Breathe," Tom muttered to himself. "Slow down. Breathe through it." He levered another round, forced himself to take a full breath, let it out slow. Popped up again. Same target. Aimed. Squeezed rather than pulled. This time the .44-40 round took the man in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him behind cover. Not a kill shot. Not even close to where Tom had aimed, but enough to take one shooter out of the fight temporarily. Where was Iselin? Tom risked a glance right and found her pressed against the canyon wall, knife in hand, eyes tracking movement above. She looked at him, and their gazes locked for half a heartbeat. No words. Didn't need words. She pointed at herself, then upward, pointed at him, then forward. A plan communicated in gestures. She was going up. He was going to provide covering fire. Tom nodded. Terrible plan. Insane plan. Only plan they had. He emptied the Winchester at the canyon rim, firing as fast as he could work the lever. Didn't aim. Didn't need to. Just needed to make the shooters keep their heads down while Iselin moved. 15 rounds in maybe 10 seconds. The rifle clicked empty, and Tom dropped behind cover fingers, already digging for loose rounds in his pockets. Above him, Iselin climbed. She moved like smoke, flowing upward, finding handholds invisible to anyone else. Her injured feet must have been screaming, but she didn't slow, didn't falter. 30 feet of near vertical rock face, and she ascended like she'd been born to it. Tom reloaded the Winchester with fingers that fumbled and dropped 2 rounds before managing to feed 13 into the magazine. Below full capacity, but enough. Had to be enough. He popped up to fire again and nearly caught a bullet through the face, pulled back just as stone exploded where his head had been, fragments stinging his cheek. "Gringo," one of the shooters called down in accented English. "You are surrounded. Throw down the rifle and we let you live." Tom didn't waste breath on a reply. They'd kill him regardless. Comancheros didn't leave witnesses, didn't leave threats to their operation. He'd known the score when he picked up the Winchester. Some choices you made knowing they led to blood. Movement above. Iselin had reached the rim. Tom saw her silhouette against the sky for just an instant, then she disappeared. Silence stretched for 3 seconds, 4, 5, then screaming. A man's voice, high and terrified, cut off abruptly, the sound of bodies struggling. Another scream, different voice, ending in a wet gurgle, then silence again. Tom waited. Winchester aimed at the rim finger on the trigger, every muscle tense. If Iselin had failed, if they'd killed her, the next face over that rim would be his target. His last target, perhaps. Iselin's face appeared. Blood spattered her cheek. She gave him a sharp nod. Tom lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking so badly now he could barely hold it. Adrenaline crash hitting hard. He made himself breathe slowly, forced his muscles to unclench. Looked at the Winchester in his hands and saw Billy Crane's blood on it, despite knowing the rifle was clean. "Are you injured?" Iselin called down. "No, you—" "No, but we have problems." Tom climbed up the goat trail. Iselin pointed out easier than the route she'd taken, but still challenging. When he reached the top, he found 2 bodies, both Comancheros, both dead from knife wounds, one to the throat, one to the heart. Both kills were clean, professional, the work of someone who'd done this before. The third man, the one Tom had shot, was gone. Blood trail led east back the way the Comancheros had come. "He will warn the others," Iselin said. "They will know we are coming now. How far ahead is their main camp? Half-day's ride, perhaps less." She wiped her knife clean on one of the dead men's shirts, then searched the bodies methodically. Found ammunition, some dried food, a leather pouch containing 23 silver dollars. The coins were dated 1878, newly minted, too shiny for men who'd been riding the back country. Tom picked up one of the coins and turned it in the light. On the back, scratched in tiny letters, were the initials W.G. "Wade Garrett," he said quietly. "You know this name, I know him. Sheriff in Tucson, or was 10 years ago when I worked those territories. We rode together a few times tracking outlaws. He was always more interested in money than justice, but I thought he stayed on the legal side of the line." Aislinn examined the coin. 23 of these, payment for something, or advance on future delivery. Children. Tom felt sick saying it. He's paying them for Apache children, probably has buyers lined up already. Mine owners, ranchers, people who want cheap labor and don't care about the law. The law does not care about us either. Aislinn pocketed the coins. So we make our own justice. They found Soldier a quarter-mile down canyon, nervous but uninjured. The horse had stopped running once the gunfire ended, standing with reins trailing like he'd been trained. Good horse. Tom made a mental note to give him extra grain when they got home. If they got home. They rode hard through the afternoon, following the wounded man's blood trail. It led exactly where Aislinn had predicted toward Skull Mesa. The landmark was visible from miles away, a flat-topped mountain rising from badlands like a ship from waves. Apache territory once, now claimed by whoever was strong enough to hold it. As sunset painted the desert in shades of blood and gold, they topped a rise and saw the Comanchero camp below. 7 horses picketed near a spring, 2 tents and a lean-to structure, smoke from a cooking fire, and off to one side, barely visible in the fading light, a separate smaller tent with a guard posted outside. "The children," Aislinn whispered. Tom counted men visible in camp, 5, including the guard. The wounded man from earlier sat near the firearm in a sling, talking animatedly and pointing in the direction Tom and Aislinn had come from. They knew pursuit had caught up, would be ready for it now. "We need a plan," Tom said. "The plan is simple. You create chaos. I get my son. That's not a plan. That's suicide with extra steps." Aislinn looked at him with eyes that had moved beyond fear into someplace harder and colder. "Do you have a better idea?" Tom studied the camp mind, working through possibilities. 7 men, though 1 was wounded. 7 guns at minimum, probably more. Against his Winchester and Colt, Aislinn's knife, and the element of surprise they'd already partially lost. The mathematics were terrible. But mathematics didn't account for desperation, didn't account for a mother fighting for her child, didn't account for a broken gunfighter looking for redemption in the desert. "We wait for night," he said finally. "Full dark when they're tired and their eyes are adjusted to firelight. I approach from the east, make noise, draw them out. You come from the west, hit the guard, get the children out. There's a ravine on the north side. Get them there. I'll meet you. And if you do not meet us, then you run. Don't wait for me. Don't come back for me. Just get your son to safety. This is not partnership. This is you dying so I can live." Tom met her eyes. "This is me making sure at least one of us completes the mission. Your son needs you, doesn't need me. I'm expendable, you're not." Aislinn grabbed his arm fingers, digging in hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me, Thomas Stone. I did not ask you to die for my son. I asked you to help me save him. There is a difference. We both get out, or we both die trying. That is partnership." The fierceness in her voice, the absolute refusal to accept his sacrifice, struck something deep in Tom's chest. When had anyone last cared whether he lived or died? When had anyone last insisted he mattered? "All right," he said quietly. "We both get out. I'll do my best." "Your best had better be very good." But she smiled slightly when she said it. "The man I see before me is not the same man who opened his door yesterday. That man was already dead. This man wants to live. This is good. The living fight harder than the already dead." They waited for full darkness. Tom used the time to check his weapons obsessively. Winchester loaded 14 rounds. Colt loaded 6 rounds. Extra ammunition distributed in pockets where he could reach it quickly. Every strap checked, every buckle tested, every possible point of failure examined and addressed. Aislinn sharpened her knife against a stone with rhythmic scraping sounds that set Tom's teeth on edge. She sang softly while she worked words in Apache he couldn't understand, but that sounded like prayer, or preparation, or goodbye. When the moon rose thin and bright, Tom stood. Time. They moved down the slope in silence, separating when they reached the base of the rise. Aislinn disappeared into darkness like she'd never existed. Tom circled east, placing each foot carefully, avoiding anything that might sound against stone or snap underfoot. The Comanchero camp settled into evening routine, men eating, drinking. One broke out a bottle of mezcal and passed it around. Good. Alcohol slowed reflexes, made men careless. Tom got within 200 yards and found a position with good sight lines and cover. He rested the Winchester across a flat rock, aimed at the fire, took 3 deep breaths to steady himself. His hands still shook, but he'd learned to work through it, learned to time his trigger pull for the momentary pauses in the tremor. "Forgive me," he whispered to no one in particular. Then he fired. The first round kicked embers from the fire, sending sparks spiraling into darkness. Men dove for cover, shouting in Spanish and English. Tom levered another round, fired again, aiming deliberately high. Wanted chaos, not kills, not yet. The camp erupted. Men grabbed rifles, returned fire blindly toward his muzzle flash. Tom ducked as bullets whined overhead, waited 3 seconds, popped up in a different position, fired twice more, moved again. He made himself sound like multiple shooters firing from different angles, creating the impression of a larger force. The Comancheros fell for it, spreading out to meet a threat that didn't exist. The guard at the children's tent abandoned his post, running to join the fight. That was Aislinn's cue. Tom couldn't see her, but he knew she was moving, knew she was at the tent now, knew she was cutting the bindings on her son's wrists and whispering for silence and preparing to run. As Aislinn cut the last binding, a voice froze her blood. "Little sister," she spun. A man stood in the tent entrance, backlit by firelight. Tall, scarred, wearing Apache clothing mixed with Mexican gear. His face, she knew that face. Older now, harder, but unmistakable. "Go Yahweh," she whispered, the name bitter on her tongue. Red Wolf smiled without warmth. "So you remember your brother-in-law. I wondered if Dakota ever told you what I became after the tribe cast me out. You killed Chief Mongus. Dakota had no choice but to betray his own blood." Red Wolf moved closer, hand on his knife. "Your precious husband chose white man's justice over family. Now I take what should have been mine. His son will learn the true Apache way, the way of strength, not surrender." Aislinn positioned herself between Red Wolf and Kai. "You will not touch him. He is my blood, more mine than yours. You were always weak, Aislinn, believing in peace, in cooperation. Look where it got Dakota, dead from white man's disease, while you beg white men for help." The accusation stung because it held truth. But Aislinn had learned that truth and righteousness were different things. "Dakota was twice the warrior you'll ever be," she said quietly. "He fought for his people's future. You fight only for yourself." Red Wolf's face darkened. "Then I'll take his son and teach him what his father should have." He lunged. Aislinn met him with her knife faster than he expected. The blade scored his arm, drawing blood. He roared, grabbed her wrist. They struggled, intimate and vicious family violence, always the cruelest kind. Then gunfire erupted outside, Tom's covering fire. Red Wolf's grip loosened for a heartbeat. Aislinn drove her knee into his wounded thigh, twisted free, slashed across his face. He fell back, blood streaming. She grabbed Kai, bolted for the ravine. Behind her, Red Wolf's scream promised vengeance. "This isn't over, sister. I will find you. I will take what's mine." But Aislinn was already gone, swallowed by darkness, Kai's hand tight in hers. Something moved in his peripheral vision. Tom spun Winchester, rising but too slow. A Comanchero had flanked his position, appeared from behind a boulder with pistol raised. The Mexican's eyes widened in recognition, and fear and determination. His finger tightened on the trigger. Tom fired from the hip, not aiming, just pointing and hoping. The Winchester bucked. The round took the Comanchero in the chest high and right. Not immediately fatal, but enough to drop him. The man's pistol fired as he fell, muzzle flash bright, and Tom felt something punch his left shoulder with sledgehammer force. He went down hard, Winchester clattering away. The shoulder burned like someone had pressed a branding iron to skin. Tom's left arm stopped working, fingers going numb. He groped for the Colt with his right hand, got it clear of the holster just as the wounded Comanchero tried to raise his pistol for another shot. Tom fired first, second shot, third shot. All 3 rounds hitting center mass at 5 yards. The Comanchero went still. Tom's shoulder screamed. He looked down and saw blood spreading across his shirt, black in the moonlight, through and through probably. Bullet had entered high on the shoulder, exited somewhere near the shoulder blade. Painful, but survivable if he didn't bleed out. Voices shouting. More gunfire, but not directed at him, coming from the tent. Aislinn must be under fire. Tom forced himself to his feet, vision graying at the edges, and stumbled toward the sound. He found her at the ravine's edge with 6 children clustered behind her. Apache kids, ages maybe 5 to 10, all terrified and clinging to each other. Aislinn stood between them and 3 Comancheros who'd cut off their escape knife in one hand, a captured pistol in the other. "Get back," she snarled at the men. "Get back or I kill the first one who moves. You got nowhere to go, Apache." The speaker was older, maybe 50, with a scar bisecting his face from hairline to jaw. "Give us the kids, and we let you walk away." "Liar." Aislinn spat the word. "You let no one walk away." Tom raised the Colt. His right hand shook so badly he could barely aim. Vision kept trying to tunnel down to darkness. He fired anyway. The round went wide, but close enough to make the Comancheros dive for cover. "Run," he shouted at Aislinn. "I'll cover you." She didn't hesitate. Grabbed 2 of the smallest children, boosted them into the ravine, followed them down. The other kids went after her, like ducklings following their mother. Within seconds, they disappeared into darkness and broken ground where horses couldn't follow easily. The Comancheros opened fire. Tom returned it, emptying the Colt at muzzle flashes. Hit nothing but made them keep their heads down. Bought Aislinn 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Enough time to get away if she ran hard, and the kids kept up. His Colt clicked empty. Tom fumbled for a reload, dropped the cylinder of fresh cartridges, watched them scatter across stone. Too dark to find them, too hurt to care. One of the Comancheros realized he was out of ammunition, stood up, rifle raised, taking careful aim. Tom waited for the impact, waited for darkness, waited for whatever came after a life spent trying to outrun ghosts. The rifle fired. Tom felt nothing. Confused, he looked down at himself, expecting blood. Found none. The Comanchero fell, instead, arrows sprouting from his throat. More arrows came from the darkness. Apache warriors, 3 of them materializing like vengeful spirits. They fell on the remaining Comancheros with knives and tomahawks and fury that had been building for generations. The fight was brutal and brief and left no survivors among the slavers. Tom tried to stay conscious, tried to ask who these warriors were, where they'd come from, but darkness pulled at him like a rip current. His legs gave out. He sat down hard, then fell sideways, and the world went away into blackness, shot through with pain. He woke to Aislinn's face above him, streaked with tears and blood and desert dust. Her hands pressed cloth against his shoulder wound. Behind her, dawn light painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. "You lived," she said, voice rough with emotion. "Foolish man, suicidal man, you lived anyway." Tom tried to speak. His throat was too dry. She gave him water, and he sipped carefully. "The children," he managed. "Safe, all safe, including my son." She gestured behind her. A small boy stood there, 7 years old, looking at Tom with enormous dark eyes filled with wonder and fear, and something that might have been hope. "Kai, come here," "Meet the man who saved your life." The boy approached slowly. Up close, Tom could see Aislinn in his features, could see the father he'd never met, could see the future that almost hadn't existed. "Thank you," Kai whispered. Tom nodded, couldn't find words, felt something break open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 5 years. Tears came, and he didn't try to stop them, let them fall while Aislinn held his hand and her son watched with solemn eyes, and Apache warriors stood guard over this impossible moment of grace in the desert. He'd been looking for redemption, thought it would feel like absolution, like weight lifted, like debts paid. Instead, it felt like beginning, like door opened, like first breath after drowning. "We need to move," one of the warriors said. "More will come." Aislinn nodded, looked at Tom. "Can you ride?" "Can I die if I don't?" "Probably." Tom smiled despite the pain. "Then I can ride." They helped him onto Soldier, Aislinn mounted behind him, Kai in front. The Apache warriors led the other children on captured horses. They rode north away from Skull Mesa, away from death toward something Tom couldn't name, but could feel approaching like sunrise. Behind them, the desert wind erased their tracks. Ahead, the future waited. The Apache village appeared in Black Mesa like a secret folded into stone. Hidden canyon narrow entrance water trickling from a spring that had sustained the people for generations. Tom counted 30 souls, mostly women and elderly children too young to fight warriors, too old to run. Survivors of a world being systematically erased. They carried him to a wickiup at the canyon's center. His shoulder had stopped bleeding, but the pain had evolved into something alive, pulsing with each heartbeat. Infection was coming. He could feel it in the heat radiating from the wound, smell it in the sweetness underneath the copper scent of blood. An old woman waited inside the wickiup, ancient face mapped with wrinkles deep as Arroyo's, one eye clouded white with blindness. But the other eye was sharp as obsidian, taking Tom's measure with a glance that seemed to weigh his soul. "Nashota," Aislinn said, respect heavy in her voice. "This is Thomas Stone, the man who helped me recover my son." Nashota moved closer, examining Tom's wound with fingers that probed without gentleness. He hissed between his teeth but didn't pull away. The old woman grunted something in Apache, then began issuing orders. Women appeared with supplies, water heated over fire, cloths boiled clean, plants Tom didn't recognize crushed into paste. "She says you are lucky," Aislinn translated. "The bullet passed through without striking bone, but poison is already in the wound. She must cut it out." Tom nodded. He'd been shot before, knew the procedure, knew it would hurt worse than the original injury. Nashota produced a knife, heated the blade in fire until it glowed red, then let it cool to black. No whiskey for sterilization here, no laudanum for pain. Just skill handed down through generations, and the understanding that sometimes healing required additional damage. The old woman cut. Tom bit down on leather, someone thrust between his teeth, and tried not to scream. Failed. The sound that came from his throat was animal stripped of humanity, pure agony given voice. Nashota worked with the precision of a surgeon opening the wound wider, cleaning out fragments of cloth and dirt, driven in by the bullet's passage. When she finished cutting, she packed the wound with poultice that burned like liquid fire. Tom's vision whited out. When it cleared, he was lying down, Aislinn holding his hand, Kai watching from the corner with wide, frightened eyes. "The worst is done," Aislinn said softly. "Now you heal or you die. Nashota says the odds are equal." "Always wanted to be 50-50. Tom's voice came out hoarse. "Better than I usually get." Aislinn smiled, but worry shadowed her eyes. "She will sing the healing songs, 4 nights, 4 songs. If you survive until the 4th dawn, the poison will not take you." 4 nights. Tom closed his eyes and let darkness take him down. He woke to singing. Nashota's voice cracked with age, but carrying power that vibrated in his bones. The words were incomprehensible, but the meaning was clear. Petition to forces older than human language. request for intervention from mountain spirits who'd watched over Apache people since time immemorial. Fever came with the second night. Tom's temperature spiked, turning the world liquid and strange. He saw Billy Crane standing in the Wikiup's shadows, 12 years old and eternally dying. Saw Jesse Crane holding his son. Saw all 37 men he'd killed standing in judgment. "Not yet," he told them. "I'm not finished yet." Billy's ghost smiled sadly. "You're never finished, Mr. Stone. That's the trick. You just keep going until you can't." Profound for a dead kid. "I learned it from you, from watching you carry me around like baggage for 5 years. The ghost moved closer. "You know I forgive you, right? Forgave you before I died. It was an accident. You didn't mean to kill me." "Doesn't matter what I meant. Matters what I did." "Does it?" "You meant to help Iceland, meant to save Kai. You got shot doing it. If you die tonight, does your good intention matter, or just the result?" Tom had no answer. The ghost faded. Fever intensified. He thrashed against blankets, throwing off heat like a furnace. Iselin appeared, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, trickling water between his lips. Her face swam in and out of focus. "Stay," she commanded. "You do not have permission to die." "Didn't ask permission. You made a promise, 1-year partnership. You owe me 11 more months." Tom tried to laugh, coughed instead, pain lancing through his shoulder. "Technically, we never shook on it." "Apache agreements do not require handshakes. You rode with me, fought beside me, bled for my son. The bargain is sealed. Now honor it." The third night brought worse visions. Tom found himself back in Tombstone, reliving the shootout in excruciating detail. Every muzzle flash, every ricochet, every decision that led to Billy Crane's death. But this time, the scenario played out differently. This time, he saw the boy before firing. This time, he held his trigger finger. This time, Jesse Crane escaped, and Billy lived. But then, the vision twisted. Jesse Crane went on to rob another bank, killed 3 people, including a woman and her infant daughter. All because Tom hadn't taken the shot. All because mercy in one moment created horror in the next. "There are no clean choices," a voice said. Tom turned and found Nashota standing beside him, though this was dream. Nashota younger, both eyes clear and bright. "Every path leads to death. The question is which deaths you can live with." "I can't live with any of them." "Then you cannot live. Simple as that. To live is to choose. To choose is to cause consequences. Some consequences are deaths. This is the price of being human." "What if I choose wrong?" "You will. Repeatedly. We all do. But choosing wrong while trying to do right is different from choosing wrong while serving evil. Your heart matters even when your aim does not." Tom woke on the 4th morning to silence. No singing, no fever dreams, just gray dawn light filtering through the Wikiup's smoke hole and the smell of sage burning in a small clay pot. His shoulder ached with a clean pain rather than the infected burning. When he touched the bandages, they were dry. Nashota sat cross-legged near the entrance, grinding something in a stone bowl. She looked up when Tom stirred, nodded, once spoke in Apache. Iselin appeared from somewhere outside. "She says you live. The mountain spirits accepted her petition, or perhaps you are simply too stubborn to die properly." "Stubbornness is underrated." Tom sat up slowly, testing his body's limits. Weak, shaky, but alive. Definitely alive. "How long was I out?" 4 days. 3 nights of fever. You said many things." "Anything embarrassing?" "You apologized to ghosts, called out names of men I assume you killed. Once you shouted something about a Winchester and redemption." She paused. "And you said my name several times." Tom felt heat that had nothing to do with fever rise in his face. "Delirium doesn't count, doesn't it?" Iselin's expression was unreadable. "Delirium strips away pretense, shows what lies underneath. You said my name like prayer." Before Tom could respond, Kai burst into the Wikiup. The boy had shed his terror over the past days, had begun to smile again. Now he carried that smile to Tom like an offering. "You are awake, Mother said you would wake today. I did not believe her, but she was right. She is always right." The words tumbled out in a rush of enthusiasm. "Do you want to see what I made for you?" The boy produced a small carved figure, wood roughly shaped but recognizable as a horse. Soldier specifically captured with surprising accuracy despite crude tools and young hands. "I made it while you were sick, to thank you. Mother says you risked your life for me even though you did not know me. She says this makes you braver than warriors who fight for glory." Tom took the carving, turned it over in his hands. Something tightened in his throat. "It's perfect, thank you, Kai. Will you teach me to shoot like you shoot? Mother says you can hit targets far away even when your hands shake." "Kai," Iceland's voice carried sharp rebuke. "Do not pester him. He needs rest. It's all right." Tom met the boy's eager eyes. "When I'm healed enough to hold a rifle steady, I'll teach you, but not to kill, to survive. There's a difference." "What difference?" "Killing is easy. Any fool with a gun can kill. Surviving takes skill. Takes knowing when to shoot and when to run, when to fight and when to hide, when to pull the trigger and when to hold fire even though every instinct screams to shoot." Tom glanced at Aislinn. "Your mother knows this. She's a survivor. That's harder than being a killer." Kai absorbed this seriously, then nodded. "I will be a survivor like Mother, and like you." After the boy left, Nashota spoke at length in Apache. Aislinn listened occasionally, asking questions, her expression growing troubled. When the old woman finished, she turned to Tom. "Nashota says we have a problem. The warriors who helped us at Skull Mesa brought information. Sheriff Wade Garrett knows about the fight. Knows Comancheros died. He is gathering men, 20, perhaps more, coming to Black Mesa to finish what the slavers started." Tom's stomach dropped. "When 3 days, maybe 4, depends on how long it takes him to deputize enough gunmen willing to attack an Apache village. We need to leave, get everyone out, find somewhere safer." Nashota spoke again, voice firm. Iceland translated. "She says there is nowhere safer. We have run for generations, moved from place to place while white men take more land, more water, more life. She says if we must die, we die here. At least this place has water and defensible ground." That's suicide. 20 armed men against what 5 warriors too old to run women and children, against what we have always had. Courage, knowledge of the land, willingness to pay any price for freedom. Island's eyes met his. "I do not expect you to stay. You have fulfilled your part of our bargain, more than fulfilled it. You are free to go." Tom looked at her, at Kai hovering in the doorway, at Nashota watching with her one good eye, at the wickiup that had sheltered him through fever and healing, thought about riding away, leaving these people to face what was coming alone, thought about Billy Crane, about 37 dead men, about 5 years hiding in the desert trying to outrun ghosts. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "But we're not just sitting here waiting to die either. If Garrett wants a fight, we'll give him one, on our terms." Over the next 2 days, Tom transformed Black Mesa from hiding place into fortress. His shoulder protested every movement, but he pushed through the pain, showed the Apache warriors how to create kill zones, where to position shooters for maximum coverage, how to use the terrain to force attackers into predetermined channels. The 3 Apache warriors who'd rescued him at Skull Mesa became his primary students. Naichi, 18 years old, quick and eager to learn. Chato, 22, more experienced but willing to defer to Tom's tactical knowledge. And Delshay, the oldest at 35, who'd fought cavalry patrols before and understood the value of preparation. "White men fight differently than Apache," Tom explained, drawing diagrams in the dirt. "They rely on superior numbers and firepower. Think overwhelming force wins battles. We use that against them." "How?" Naichi asked. "By making their numbers a disadvantage. The canyon entrance is narrow. Only 3 men can ride abreast. We fortify it with rocks and timber, create a choke point. When they enter, we hit them from above. Rifles here and here." He marked positions on his crude map. "Arrows from these positions. They'll be trapped in a killing box with nowhere to go but back. Delche studied the plan. You have fought this way before. Different war, same principles. Gettysburg taught me that defensive positions and high ground beat numerical superiority if you use them right. They worked like men possessed, built barriers from rocks and deadfall timber, created firing positions with overhead cover, stockpiled ammunition and arrows, drew water from the spring to fill every container in case siege came. Tom pushed them hard, pushed himself harder, ignoring pain and weakness. Iceland worked beside him, directing the women in preparations. They created escape routes for children, hidden paths only they knew, cached food and water in the rocks beyond the village, prepared for the possibility that defense might fail and survival would require flight. On the third evening, Iceland found Tom checking firing positions for the dozenth time. "You need to rest. Your shoulder is bleeding again." Tom looked down. Sure enough, red had soaked through the bandages. "I'll rest when this is done." "You will rest now or you will be useless tomorrow." She took his arm, led him back to the wickiup, despite his protests. Engaged, she unwrapped the bandages, examined the wound. "You tore something. Nashota's work is undone. Can't be helped. Work needs doing. The work will wait while I redress this wound. Sit." Tom sat. Iceland cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, repacked it with fresh poultice, rewrapped it with clean cloth. Her hands were gentle, but her face was hard. "You are trying to die," she said finally, "working until your body breaks, seeking death on your own terms. I'm trying to keep people alive. You are trying to pay a debt that cannot be paid. The boy you killed stays dead regardless of how many Apache you save. Your guilt remains regardless of your sacrifice." The words struck like physical blows. Tom looked away, jaw tight. "You don't understand. I understand grief. I understand guilt. I watched my husband die slowly over 3 months, coughing blood, suffocating by degrees. I could not save him, cannot bring him back, but I do not seek death to join him. I seek life to honor him. There is a difference. What if I don't deserve life?" Iceland grabbed his face, forced him to meet her eyes. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. You breathe, you wake each morning, you make choices. That is life. Whether you deserve it is a question for spirits and gods, not for broken men hiding in deserts." Tom held her gaze, saw strength there, saw grief acknowledged but not surrendered to, saw a woman who'd lost everything and still chose to keep fighting. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "Don't know how to let go. Then learn. I will teach you. But first you must survive tomorrow. Must help us survive tomorrow. Then we can discuss lessons in living." That night Tom couldn't sleep. He sat outside the wickiup watching stars wheel overhead Winchester across his knees. Tomorrow Garrett would come with 20 men and bloodlust. Tomorrow people would die. Maybe him, maybe Aislinn, maybe Kai, maybe all of them. He thought about prayer, but had no gods to pray to. Thought about running, but had nowhere to go. Thought about Billy Crane and realized, with surprise, that the ghost had been quiet since the fever broke. Maybe fever had burned it out. Maybe Nashota's songs had driven it away. Maybe he'd simply run out of room for ghosts while preparing for living enemies. Footsteps approached. Kai appeared out of darkness, small and solemn in the starlight. "Cannot sleep?" the boy asked. "Too much thinking. You afraid? Mother says being afraid is acceptable, as long as you do not let fear choose your actions. Your mother is a wise woman." Kai sat beside him, small body pressed against Tom's good side. "Will we die tomorrow?" Tom considered lying. Decided the boy deserved truth. "We might. Garrett has more men and more guns. But we have better ground and better reason to fight. Sometimes that's enough." "What if it is not enough?" "Then we make it enough. We fight harder than they expect, smarter than they can match. We make them pay for every foot of ground. We make them understand that attacking Apache means bleeding, means dying, means going home in boxes." Kai absorbed this. "You will protect Mother." The question hit Tom unexpectedly hard. This boy, 7 years old, already understanding that he might lose his mother, already trying to arrange for her safety after he was gone. "I'll protect her," Tom promised, "and you, and everyone here, or I'll die trying." Father said similar words before the sickness took him. He could not keep his promise. I know. Sometimes we can't keep our promises, no matter how hard we try, but we make them anyway, because the trying matters, because intention matters, because fighting for something is better than surrendering to nothing. Kai leaned against him, small and warm and trusting. "I am glad Mother brought you here, glad you did not turn her away." Tom put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "Me too, kid. Me too." They sat together in silence, watching stars and waiting for dawn. When it came, it would bring violence and death and a reckoning that had been building since the moment Iceland knocked on his door. But right now in this moment there was just an old gunfighter and a young boy finding comfort in each other's presence while the desert night kept watch overhead. Tom held the Winchester and hoped it would be enough, prayed to gods he didn't believe in that it would be enough, knew in his bones that enough was never guaranteed, but kept hoping anyway, because hope was all they had left. They came at noon when the sun turned the desert into a furnace, and heat shimmered off rocks like water. 23 riders, more than expected silhouettes, wavering in the distance like demons summoned from hell. Tom watched them approach from his position on the canyon rim, Winchester loaded and ready hands steadier than they'd been in years. Fear did that sometimes, burned away the tremor, focused the mind down to the width of a rifle barrel. Sheriff Wade Garrett rode at the column's head, recognizable even at distance by his bulk and the silver star catching sunlight. The men behind him were a mix of deputized townsmen and hired guns, the kind of men who'd kill for $20 and a bottle of whiskey. Tom had known their type, had been their type once upon a time. Beside Tom, Delshea notched an arrow bowstring taut. Nietzsche and Chato held positions 30 yards to either side, creating a kill zone that covered the entire canyon entrance. Below, rocks and timber barriers funneled any approach into a corridor barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast. "Let them enter," Tom said quietly. "Wait for my shot. Then rain hell." The column reached the canyon mouth. Garrett raised a hand, halting his men. Smart. He'd been a soldier, once knew about choke points and ambushes. The sheriff stood in his stirrups, surveying the canyon, looking for threats. His eyes found Tom on the rim. Recognition flashed across his face even at 200 yards. Garrett smiled, not pleasantly. "Stone?" His voice echoed off canyon walls. "Thought you were dead. Or drunk, or both." "Disappointed," Tom called back. "Curious. What's a washed-up gunslinger doing with Apache savages? They paying you, or you just gone native in your old age?" "I'm doing what you should be doing, protecting people instead of selling them." Garrett's smile hardened. "Big words from a man who murdered 37 people for money. You're a killer, Stone. Same as me. Don't pretend otherwise." "You're right. I am a killer. But I killed wanted men, adults who chose their path. You're selling children. There's a difference. Law doesn't recognize Apache as citizens, can't sell what isn't human in the eyes of the law." Tom felt rage rise hot and clean, burning away the last of his hesitation. "Then the law is wrong, and you're a coward hiding behind bad law to profit from suffering." Garrett's face went red. "I'm giving you one chance, Stone. Walk away. Take your horse and ride. I'll even give you a 10-minute head start. But stay, and you die with the rest of these animals." Tom shouldered the Winchester sighted on Garrett's chest. At this range, even with the tremor, he couldn't miss. One shot could end this before it started. Take out the leader and watch the hired guns scatter. But that wasn't the plan. The plan required Garrett to enter the canyon, required him to commit his forces to terrain where numbers became disadvantage. Tom lowered the rifle slightly. "Can't do that, Sheriff. Made a promise. Turns out keeping promises matters more than I thought." "Then you're a fool." Garrett drew his pistol And fools die young. I'm 40 years old. Died young years ago. This is just my ghost settling accounts." Garrett spurred his horse forward. The column followed 23 riders entering the canyon in a mass of horseflesh and weapons and misplaced confidence. They made it 20 yards before Tom fired. The Winchester's report echoed like thunder. Tom's first round took Garrett's horse in the chest, clean kill, dropping the animal instantly. The sheriff went down hard, pinned under 1,200 pounds of dying mount. Tom levered another round, fired at the next rider, missed as the tremor returned. Third shot took that rider in the shoulder, spinning him from the saddle. Arrows flew from 3 positions simultaneously. Chato and Naiche and Delche releasing in coordinated volleys that turned the air deadly. Arrows found flesh. Men screamed. Horses reared, throwing riders, creating chaos that multiplied with each passing second. The hired guns returned fire blindly, bullets whining off rocks, thudding into timber barriers. None of the shooters could see their targets clearly. Tom and the Apache warriors fired from concealment, from elevated positions, from angles the riders below couldn't defend against. It was slaughter. Professional, methodical, merciless. Tom felt nothing, no satisfaction, no horror. Just the cold focus of a man doing necessary work. He fired and levered and fired again. Each shot carefully placed, each trigger pull a choice made and accepted. 8 rounds, 9, 10. Men fell or ran or died. The mathematics of violence playing out exactly as he'd calculated. A few of Garrett's men made it to the barriers, trying to take cover behind the timber and rocks Tom's group had placed. Big mistake. The barriers had been positioned to funnel attackers, not protect them. From Tom's elevated position, they were exposed. He picked them off with the careful precision of a man who'd done this too many times to feel anything about it anymore. 15 minutes. That's how long the fight lasted. Felt like hours, felt like seconds. Time turned elastic under stress, stretching and compressing according to rules known only to adrenaline and fear. When the shooting stopped, 11 men lay dead or dying in the canyon. 7 had fled, riding hard back the way they'd come, wanting nothing more to do with Apache or canyons or sheriffs who led them into kill boxes. 5 remained pinned behind insufficient cover, including Garrett, who'd crawled from under his dead horse and now crouched behind its corpse. "Surrender," Tom called down. "Throw out your weapons and you live. Keep fighting and you die here. Go to hell." Garrett's voice carried raw fury and fear in equal measure. Tom sighed, reloaded the Winchester methodically, called to Delche in the Apache warrior's own language, words Iceland had taught him. "Can you hit the sheriff from there?" "Yes, but you said to give them chance to surrender." "I did. He refused. That was his choice." Delche's arrow flew true, caught Garrett in the thigh, punching through muscle and tendon. The sheriff went down screaming. Tom waited, gave the remaining 4 men time to reconsider their life choices. 3 of them threw out their guns. The 4th tried to run. Chato's arrow took him in the back before he'd gone 5 yards. "Cease fire," Tom ordered. Stood up Winchester ready, but pointed at the ground. "You 3, on your feet, hands where I can see them." The hired guns complied, terrified hands raised high. Tom climbed down from his position, every movement careful. His shoulder ached abominably. Fresh blood had soaked through the bandages again. Didn't matter. Pain was just information, could be acknowledged and ignored. He approached Garrett. The sheriff lay in the dirt, hands clutching his wounded thigh, face pale with blood loss and shock. Tom stood over him, Winchester casual in the crook of his arm. "You're under arrest," Tom said, "for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, human trafficking, and accessory to murder." Garrett laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "You can't arrest me. You're not law." "Don't need to be law. I'm just a citizen making a citizen's arrest." "Those 3 men you have left, they're witnesses. They'll testify you led them here to attack peaceful people, that you profited from selling children, that you violated every oath you swore when you pinned on that badge." "No court will convict me. I'm a sheriff. You're nothing." Tom knelt, bringing his face close to Garrett's. Maybe you're right. Maybe the law won't touch you. But I'm going to make sure every newspaper from here to San Francisco knows what you did. Going to tell them about the silver dollars, about the children, about the Comancheros you paid. Going to destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you'll never hold office again, never be trusted again, never be anything again except the man who sold children for profit. Fear replaced fury in Garrett's eyes. You can't prove any of that. Tom reached into his pocket, pulled out one of the silver dollars from the Comanchero camp, dropped it on Garrett's chest. W.G., your initials, freshly minted 1878. 23 of them in Comanchero pockets. How do you explain that, Sheriff? Garrett had no answer. Tom gestured to the Apache warriors. Bind him. Bind all of them. We'll take them to the U.S. Marshal in Tucson. Let federal law sort it out. While Nietzsche and Chato secured the prisoners, Tom surveyed the canyon. Bodies everywhere. Blood soaking into desert sand. The smell of death, thick in the air. Another fight won. More ghosts added to his collection. Aislinn appeared from the village Kai at her side. The boy stared at the carnage with wide eyes, face pale. Tom wanted to shield him from it, but children who lived in this world needed to understand its reality, needed to see what violence looked like, what it cost. Is it over? Aislinn asked. This part is. But Garrett was just one man. The system that allowed him to operate is still there, still grinding people up. This was a battle, not a war. She nodded slowly. One battle is more than we usually win. I will take it. Tom looked at Kai. The boy met his eyes, something hardening in that young face. Growing up too fast, learning too young that the world was cruel and justice was rare and survival required strength most people never needed to find. I'm sorry you had to see this, Tom said. I am not. Kai's voice was steady. Mother says truth is better than comfortable lies. This is truth. Bad men came to hurt us. We stopped them. I am glad we stopped them. Being glad about necessary violence and enjoying unnecessary violence are different things. Remember that. The day you start enjoying it, you become what we just fought. Kai nodded solemnly. I will remember. They spent the rest of the day cleaning up, buried the dead in a mass grave outside the canyon, no markers, no ceremony. Men who'd come to kill didn't deserve the courtesy of individual graves. The wounded they treated as well as they could, though Nashota refused to waste her medicine on men who'd attacked her people. Fair enough, Tom used his own supplies, dwindling now, to keep the prisoners from dying before they reached Tucson. That evening, Tom sat with Aislinn on a flat rock overlooking the canyon. Sunset painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful and indifferent to the violence that had soaked into its soil. 1 year, Aislinn said quietly. That was our bargain. 1 year of partnership. I remember. It has been 2 weeks. 11.5 months remain. She paused. I release you from the bargain. Tom turned to look at her. What? You have done more than I asked. Saved my son. Saved all of us. Been wounded twice defending people you barely know. The debt is paid. More than paid. You are free to leave if you wish. Tom studied her profile against the sunset. Strong, scarred, beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with spirit that refused to break. What if I don't wish to leave? He asked. She turned to face him. Then why stay? Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks this stopped being about debt, stopped being about Billy Crane or redemption or paying for past sins, started being about something else. What else? Tom chose his words carefully. About finding a place where I matter, where what I do has meaning beyond just killing or surviving, about finding people worth fighting for, worth bleeding for. He paused. Worth living for. Aislinn's expression softened. You barely know us. I know enough. Know you're the strongest person I've ever met. Know Kai deserves a chance to grow up safe. Know this village has more honor in it than every town I've ever passed through. That's enough. And when the year ends, what then? Then you decide if you want me to stay. If the answer is no, I go. No argument, no bitterness, but if the answer is yes, Tom trailed off, uncertain how to finish. If yes, Iceland prompted, then maybe we see what partnership becomes when it's no longer bound by obligation, when it's just choice, free choice. You choosing me choosing you, building something new from the wreckage of what we've lost. Iceland was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were calloused and strong-scarred from work and war. They felt perfect. "Ask me again in 11 months," she said. "Ask me when obligation has expired and only choice remains. Then we will see." Tom squeezed her hand gently. "Deal." They sat together as darkness fell and stars emerged like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Below, the village settled into evening routines, cooking fires, children playing despite the day's violence, life continuing because it had to, because surrender was the same as death. Kai appeared climbing up to join them. He wedged himself between Tom and Iceland, small and warm and trusting. "Tell me a story," the boy demanded. "What kind of story?" Tom asked. "A story where the good people win, where families stay together, where children are safe." Tom looked at Iceland. She nodded slightly. Permission granted. "All right," Tom said. "Once there was a man who'd lost his way. He'd done bad things and couldn't forgive himself, so he hid in the desert thinking isolation would heal him. But it didn't. It just made him more lost." "Sad story," Kai observed. "Wait, it gets better. One day a brave woman knocked on his door. She'd lost everything but refused to give up. She made him a deal. 'Help me save my son,' she said, 'and I'll help you save yourself.' Did he help her? He tried, got shot doing it, almost died. But she saved him right back. And her son taught him that maybe he wasn't beyond redemption after all. Maybe people could change. Maybe the past didn't have to define the future." "How does it end?" Kai asked. Tom smiled. "Don't know yet. Story's still being written. But I think it ends with the man realizing he'd been looking for home in the wrong places. Home wasn't a location. It was people. And he'd finally found his people." Kai considered this. "I like that story. Can it be true? I'm working on making it true. We'll see if I succeed." The boy leaned against him, satisfied. Above, stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Below, the village breathed and lived and continued, despite everything trying to destroy it. And here on this rock, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds sat together and watched the night deepen. Tom thought about Billy Crane, found that the ghost had finally quieted. Maybe because he'd stopped running from it. Maybe because he'd finally done something worth the weight of that death. Maybe because forgiveness came not from forgetting, but from choosing to do better with whatever time remained. His shoulder ached. His hands would probably shake tomorrow. Garrett and his men would face trial or escape, or corruption would protect them. The world was still cruel and unjust and grinding people to dust. But right now, in this moment, Tom Stone was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do, with exactly the people he needed beside him, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The journey to Tucson took 6 days. Tom and Delche escorted Garrett and the 3 surviving hired guns, hands-bound riding horses taken from the dead. The wounded sheriff sat his saddle, poorly, fever setting into the arrow wound despite Tom's attempts at treatment. Might lose the leg, might die of infection. Tom found he cared less than he should. They stopped at a ranch on the 3rd day to buy supplies and send a telegraph to the U.S. Marshal. The rancher, a weathered man named Hollister, took one look at Garrett's badge and the bound prisoners and disappeared into his house. Came back with a shotgun. "What's the meaning of this, Stone, that Sheriff Garrett you got trussed up like a hog?" Tom dismounted carefully, favoring his wounded shoulder. "Sheriff Garrett is under citizen's arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and accessory to murder. I'm taking him to the U.S. Marshal for trial." Hollister's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious charge. It's a serious crime." Tom pulled out the silver dollars, showed them to the rancher. "Found these on Comancheros, who were selling Apache children to mine owners and ranchers. All minted this year, all marked with Garrett's initials. He was paying bounties, $20 a head for kids who could work." The rancher studied the coins, then looked at Garrett. This true Wade. Garrett's face had gone gray with pain and fever. "Don't listen to him. He's protecting savages, turned his back on his own kind." "I'm protecting children," Tom said flatly, "from men who profit off suffering. If that makes me a traitor to my kind, then I'm proud to be one." Hollister considered for a long moment. Then he lowered the shotgun. "My youngest daughter is 7 years old, same age as the Apache kids you say he was selling. I don't care what color those children are. Man who'd sell a 7-year-old deserves hanging." He looked at Tom. "You need anything?" "Food, water, fresh horses. Telegraph to the U.S. Marshal would help. Let him know we're coming." "I'll send it myself, and Stone." "You did right. Don't let anyone tell you different." The words settled into Tom's chest like warmth. Validation from an unexpected source. Proof that not everyone had lost their moral compass. They reached Tucson on the 6th day. The town had grown since Tom's last visit, sprawling beyond its original boundaries like a living thing consuming desert. More people, more buildings, more of everything except justice, which remained as scarce as ever. U.S. Marshal Robert Crane met them at his office. No relation to Billy Crane, Tom had checked. Just unfortunate coincidence. The marshal was 50, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen enough corruption to be cynical, but not enough to stop caring. "Stone, been a long time." Crane looked at the prisoners. "Heard you'd gone native. Didn't believe it until now." "Not native, just human. Turns out the two aren't mutually exclusive." Crane smiled slightly. "Telegram said you had evidence against Sheriff Garrett. Human trafficking charges. That's federal jurisdiction. I'm listening." Tom laid it out methodically. The silver dollars, the Comanchero camp, the children rescued, the testimony of the 3 hired guns obtained through judicious application of fear, and the promise of reduced charges. By the time he finished, Crane's expression had gone from skeptical to grim. "This is ugly," the marshal said. "Garrett has friends, connections. He'll fight this hard." "Let him fight. I've got evidence. Got witnesses. Got dead Comancheros with his marked coins in their pockets." "You also killed 11 men in that canyon. Some people might call that murder. Self-defense. They attacked an Apache village. We defended it. The 3 survivors will testify to that if they want to avoid accessory charges." Crane studied Tom with renewed interest. "You've thought this through. Had 6 days on the trail to think. Figured you'd try to poke holes, made sure there weren't any to poke." The marshal nodded slowly. "All right. I'll take Garrett into custody. Hold him for federal trial. But Stone, you need to understand something. Even with all this evidence, conviction isn't guaranteed. Juries don't like Indians, don't care what happened to their children. You might do everything right and still watch him walk free." Tom had expected this, dreaded it, but accepted it. Then at least we tried. At least we made it public. Even if he beats the charges, everyone will know what he did. That's something. It's not justice. Justice is rare. Truth is better than nothing. Crane stood, offered his hand. Tom shook it. The marshal's grip was firm. "You're a better man than you used to be, Stone. 5 years ago, you'd have just shot Garrett and called it done. 5 years ago, I was a different person. Dying does that to a man, changes your perspective on what matters." After delivering the prisoners, Tom spent 2 days in Tucson recovering. Saw a real doctor who cleaned his shoulder wound, properly stitched what needed stitching. Prescribed rest Tom had no intention of taking. Bought supplies with money he didn't have, running up debts at stores that remembered when he'd been someone important. On the 3rd morning, he bought a newspaper. Front page carried the story. "Sheriff arrested in child trafficking scheme." Details were sparse but damning. The article mentioned Tom by name, called him a former bounty hunter turned Apache defender, made him sound almost noble. Tom threw the paper away. Nobility was for people who hadn't killed 37 men. He was just trying to do less harm than he'd already done. He started the journey back to Black Mesa on a new horse, a sturdy roan mare the livery owner had sold him on credit. The ride gave him time to think about what waited at the village, about Iceland's offer to release him from their bargain, about whether he wanted to be released. The answer surprised him with its certainty. He didn't want release, wanted the opposite, wanted to stay, wanted to build something permanent instead of temporary, wanted to stop running from his past and start running toward a future. Wanted family, wanted home, wanted things he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve. Maybe he still didn't deserve them, but maybe deserve was the wrong metric. Maybe the question wasn't what he'd earned, but what he'd choose to become. Black Mesa appeared on the horizon at Sunset Canyon walls, glowing red gold in the dying light. Tom's chest tightened with something that felt like coming home, which was insane. He'd known these people for 3 weeks. 3 weeks wasn't long enough to build belonging, except it was. Because belonging wasn't about duration, was about depth, about finding people who saw you clearly and chose you anyway, about being seen and choosing them back. Iceland waited at the canyon entrance, Kai beside her, both watching his approach with expressions Tom couldn't read at distance. When he got close enough to see their faces clearly, Kai broke into a run. "You came back!" The boy slammed into Tom's legs with enough force to nearly unseat him. "Mother said you would come back, but I was not certain. You were gone so long." Tom dismounted, ruffled the boy's hair. "Told you I'd be back. I keep my promises." "What happened to the bad sheriff?" "He's in jail, waiting for trial, might go to prison for a long time." "Good, he deserves prison." Kai said it with the certainty of a child who'd learned too early that the world held monsters in human skin. Iceland approached more slowly, studied Tom with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to his bones. "You look tired." 6 days on the trail will do that. How are things here? Quiet, peaceful, boring, which is good. We have had enough excitement." She paused. "Nashota wants to see you, says she has something to discuss." They found the old medicine woman in her wickiup grinding herbs with patient precision. She looked up when Tom entered, gestured for him to sit, spoke in Apache Iceland translating. "She says you have proven yourself, fought for the people, bled for the people. This makes you family in the eyes of the tribe." Iceland's voice carried something Tom couldn't identify. "She asks what you intend to do with this family you have earned." Tom looked at Nashota at her one good eye, watching him with ancient patience. "Tell her I intend to stay, if she'll have me, if the tribe will have me. I've spent 5 years running from ghosts. I'd like to spend whatever time I have left building something real." Nashota listened to the translation, nodded slowly, spoke again longer this time. Iceland's voice grew softer. "She says the mountain spirits have spoken to her in dreams. They say you are a bridge, a man who stands between 2 worlds, white and Apache, violence and peace, death and life. She says bridges are sacred. They allow crossing, allow connection, allow understanding. I'm not sacred. I'm just trying to do better. She says that is what makes you sacred. The trying, the choosing, the daily decision to be more than what you were." Iceland paused. "She gives you a name, Hashke Nabaahi, warrior who returns. Because you came back when you could have run. Because you return each day to the choice of being better." Tom felt something break open in his chest. A name, an Apache name, given by a medicine woman who'd lived through decades of violence and loss and still believed in redemption. "Tell her I'm honored. Tell her I'll try to live up to it." Nashota smiled, rare expression on her weathered face. Spoke one more time brief. "She says honor is not in perfection. Honor is in effort. Now go. She has work to do, and you have promises to keep." Outside, twilight had deepened toward true night. Stars emerged hard and bright. Aislinn walked beside Tom toward his wickiup, the one the tribe had built while he was gone. Small, simple, his. A home, Aislinn said. They built it while you were in Tucson, to show you were welcome, to show you belong. Tom looked at the structure, felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, or say everything. But first, walk with me. We need to talk. They walked to the canyon rim, to the flat rock where they'd sat before. The village spread below cooking fires like small stars against darkness. Children's laughter echoed, life continuing despite everything that tried to stop it. 11 months remain on our bargain, Aislinn said, but I meant what I told you before. You are released from obligation, free to leave, free to stay, your choice. What if I choose to stay? What does that mean? It means partnership continues, not because you owe me, because you choose it. And at the end of the 11 months, Aislinn turned to face him. At the end of 11 months, I will ask you a question, and you will answer honestly. No obligation, no debt, just truth between two people who have bled together. What question? The question of whether what we have built is worth making permanent, whether partnership becomes something more, whether a broken gunslinger and a widowed Apache woman can create a family from the wreckage of their pasts. Tom's heart hammered. You're talking about marriage. I am talking about choice, about building something new, about two people deciding that together is better than alone. She paused. But I will not ask until the obligation has expired, until you are certain you stay because you want to, not because you must. I already know my answer. Then you will know it even more certainly in 11 months. Be patient, Thomas Stone. Good things are worth waiting for. She was right. Tom knew she was right. Rushing would taint, it would leave room for doubt about motives and obligations. Better to wait. Better to let time prove what intentions couldn't. 11 months, he agreed. I'll be here. I know you will. Aislinn smiled, took his hand. Now come. The village has prepared a feast. They wish to welcome you home properly, with food and stories and celebration. I'm not used to celebrating. Then it is time you learned. The feast was simple but joyous. Roasted rabbit and corn, bread cooked on hot stones, water sweetened with cactus fruit. The entire village gathered 30 people, finding reasons to smile despite hardship and loss. They told stories around the fire. Delche recounted the battle at Skull Mesa, embellishing Tom's role until he sounded like some legendary warrior instead of a shaking gunfighter who'd gotten lucky. Nietzsche told jokes that had children giggling. Chato demonstrated arrow-making techniques. Then Nashota called for silence. The old woman stood leaning heavily on a staff and began to sing. The song was in Apache incomprehensible to Tom, but the emotion transcended language. It spoke of loss and survival of ancestors and descendants of threads connecting past to future. When she finished, she gestured to Tom. Aislinn whispered, "She wants you to tell a story about yourself, about how you came to be here." Tom stood uncomfortable under the weight of so many eyes. He'd never been good at talking about himself, had spent 5 years avoiding exactly this kind of attention. But these people had accepted him, had built him a home, deserved honesty in return. "I was lost," he began, voice rough. "Had been lost for 5 years, maybe longer. I'd done things I couldn't forgive myself for, killed people, including a boy who didn't deserve to die. I thought isolation would heal me, thought if I hid long enough the guilt would fade." He paused, gathering thoughts. Then Aislinn knocked on my door, offered me a bargain I didn't understand. Help save her son, she said, and she'd help save me. I thought she meant save my life, but she meant something deeper. Save my soul, save my future, save whatever part of me hadn't died with Billy Crane. Kai watched with wide eyes. The village listened in absolute silence. I don't know if I'm saved yet. Don't know if redemption works that way. But I know I'm better than I was. I know I've found people worth fighting for, worth bleeding for, worth living for. And that's more than I had 3 weeks ago, more than I thought I'd ever have again. Tom looked at Aislinn. Your people have given me a name, Hashke Nabahi, warrior who returns. I promise to honor that name, to return each day to the choice of being better, to stand with you against whatever comes, to protect what we're building here. He sat down to silence. Then Kai started clapping. Others joined until the entire village applauded, sound echoing off canyon walls like affirmation from the stone itself. Later, alone in his new wickiup, Tom lay on blankets the women had woven and stared at the smoke hole above. Through it, stars were visible, the same stars that had watched him bury his Winchester 5 years ago, the same stars that had witnessed Billy Crane's death, the same stars that would watch whatever came next. He thought about the 11 months ahead, about building a life instead of hiding from one, about teaching Kai to shoot and hunt and be strong without being cruel, about learning Apache language and customs and history, about earning day by day the family he'd been given, about Aislinn and the question she'd ask when obligation expired and only choice remained. His answer was already formed, had been forming since the moment she'd collapsed on his doorstep and looked at him with eyes that refused to beg. Yes, the answer would be yes, was already yes, would always be yes. But she was right to make him wait, right to insist on certainty, right to demand that choice be free from coercion or debt or anything except genuine desire. 11 months. He could wait 11 months, could use that time to prove himself worthy of what he'd been given, could build something strong enough to last. Outside the village, settled into sleep, Tom listened to the sounds of home, distant conversations, a baby crying quickly soothed, wind through canyon walls, the crackle of dying fires. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't dream of Billy Crane, didn't wake shaking and sick with guilt, just slept deep and dreamless and whole. Montana, 1965. The ranch. Michael sat silent in the locked room, the Winchester still resting in Tom's lap, the photograph of the three of them, Tom, Aislinn, Kai, on the table between them. The turquoise stone caught the late afternoon light. So you married her, Michael said finally. Great-grandmother Aislinn. Tom smiled, fingers brushing the stone. 1 year later. Apache ceremony under the stars. She made me wait the full 11 months, made sure I stayed, because I wanted to, not because I owed her. He paused. Best decision I ever made. We had 43 years together before the cancer took her in 1960. And grandfather Kai grew up strong, became a translator, helped negotiate treaties between Apache and the government, married a teacher from the reservation school. Your father was their only son. Tom's voice roughened. Kai died in France 1918. Influenza, not bullets. I never forgave that war for taking him. Michael picked up the photograph, studied his great-grandmother's face. She looks fierce. She was. She taught me that strength isn't about domination. It's about enduring. About choosing to build when the world wants you to destroy. Tom stood slowly, knees protesting. That Colt you were waving around this morning, it's a tool, like this Winchester. Neither good nor evil. The man holding it decides what it becomes. I'm sorry, Grandpa. Everyone at school acts like being tough means being mean, like the only way to be respected is to scare people. Tom placed a weathered hand on his grandson's shoulder. Fear isn't respect. Fear is just fear. Real respect comes from what you build, who you help, how you treat people when no one's watching. He gestured to the photograph. Your great-grandmother taught me that. Cost her everything to do it. Least I can do is pass it on. Michael looked at the Winchester, then at Tom. Will you teach me not to scare people, but to be better? Tom felt something warm unfold in his chest. 4 generations. The legacy continuing. That's exactly what she would have wanted. Come on, we'll start with breathing exercises, learning to be steady when everything shakes. As they left the room, Tom locked the trunk one last time. The ghosts were quiet now. Not gone ghosts, never fully left, but resting. Satisfied, perhaps, that the man who'd created them had spent his remaining years trying to create something better. Outside, the Montana wind carried the scent of coming snow. Tom breathed deep, held his grandson's shoulder, and walked toward the future. Home. The word still felt perfect.